question is really what is happening with the open-ended working group, right? We have, well, first of all, congratulations on your appointment. We are looking forward to having you here in Geneva. So that is great. So very good news. So you are actually having a meeting this coming Thursday. What is going to be discussed in this meeting?
Thank you very much, Maya, first of all, for your interest. I have to say, you know, I'm taking it day by day these days because I'm on my way out from New York. So I was looking forward to exchanging with you today. The Unity meeting, as I understand, is in particular about the role of civil society and other stakeholders in our discussions on cybersecurity, which is, of course, important because, as we know, the technology that we're discussing in this working group is by and large provided by non-state parties, by private companies, etc. The impact of the use of this technology is by and large, of course, on individual people and companies, etc. So to have a broad discussion on these issues is important, and that's how I understand it we will address on Thursday.
Yes, indeed, because this is the first time that the United Nations actually can convene a group that actually has members from the private sector as well as NGOs that can actually be on the negotiating table to discuss perhaps a normative framework. How do you see that happening? Do you think that we are looking at a normative framework going forward?
The group I'm chairing, the so-called open-ended working group, is in fact an intergovernmental process. Open-ended means that it's open to all member states. That's a first. You know, it's not the first time that the UN is addressing the issue. The impact of cyber technology, ICTs, on peace and security is, of course, not a new phenomenon. The UN has actually started quite early to talk about this, mostly through what we call these group of governmental experts. These were relatively small-sized groups, 15, later 20, later 25 experts discussing the issue, but they've done so for a long time, for more than 20 years, and come up with some important work. The open-ended working group is the first time that all member states have an opportunity to discuss these issues, to exchange concerns and requirements and needs. And as we've seen so far, we've had a number of meetings already since the group was established in late 2018. There is, in fact, not a single member state that has not had experience with this kind of issue. Everybody has a story to tell, and it's really, the time is really right now to have this discussion in a format where everybody can speak up. Although it's a government-led and intergovernmental negotiations, there are opportunities for exchange with stakeholders for the reasons I mentioned before. And we will keep trying, we will keep taking measures, even under the current circumstances, which are a bit complicated, to make sure that these discussions, at least, can remain open and inclusive and transparent. Always, of course, respecting that in the end, it will be the member states who decide what will be in our report, what kind of recommendations we will come up with.
Indeed, because governments are part also of the open-ended working group. So they have presented already their observations to you. So now you gather all the documents, you review all the documents, and a report, I understand, will be produced and presented during the General Assembly. So what do you see were the three main points that you'd see coming out of this report? Directions that you'd see that you could comment on?
It's a little early still to tell because the discussions, as you mentioned before, had to be rescheduled. We were supposed to have our final meeting, third meeting only, but the final one in July, about next week after next. Given the current circumstances, it's obviously not possible to travel and come together and have these discussions. So we had to reinvent our work plan. So instead, what we have been doing now is we've had a number of virtual meetings, very interesting, all these cyber experts now using these means. Meetings with people from sitting in New York, sitting in Mexico, sitting in Geneva, sitting in Singapore, in Beijing, from around the world, and keep up the momentum and the dynamic. The final meeting where we will then have to decide on what will be in the report, what will be our recommendations, will have to take place at some later point. We don't have the exact dates for that yet, and it's because this is ongoing, and because we are delayed after the pandemic. It's too early really for me to tell you what's going to be in the report. Also, it's not up to me, it's not the chair who decides, it's the member states. But maybe just as an indication, you know that the agenda has 6 items. So member states in this group are discussing what are the current and potential threats. That's a very interesting discussion because, as you know, the situation is very dynamic, and even over the last 3 months now during the pandemic, we saw a lot of developments again in the field of ICT, and their impact on peace and security. We're discussing international law. What's the applicability of international law on this issue? We are discussing norms, rules for state behavior, how do they apply, do they need to be developed? We're discussing confidence building measures, a very important part. And we're discussing capacity building. It's obvious that capacities, the needs are already very different. Capacities are very different. There's a lot that can be done to strengthen the resilience of member states against attacks, against ICT attacks, through capacity building. And last but not least, the member states will also discuss how to continue. Do they want the mandate of the group ends in the current cycle of the General Assembly, but one of the issues we have on the agenda is how, if and how do member states want to continue discussion? Do they want to have a new format, a new platform, a regular discussion? So all of these points are still under discussion, and it's too early for me to tell exactly where we're going. But stay tuned and read our report once it's out.
Yes, I will, certainly. So is there a date for the reports to be presented, or is just before the General Assembly? And is it going to be presented live or virtually?
That I don't know yet. Who knows what's going on next year? Our current mandate says we have to present it within the 75th session of the General Assembly, so that would be by summer next year. Of course, as you know, these processes always take time, and there's a lot of translations, etc., etc. So we can't wait until summer next year. We will have to do it sometime earlier. But given the current circumstances, we don't know when people can travel again. We don't know when we can meet again. How many people can come together? All of that, it's a little uncertain. But what's the good thing is that the interest of member states is still very high. We saw that in these virtual meetings we had last week. We had 3 rounds, and there was again a very high number of delegations participating, very engaged, very sincere and substantive contributions. You know, when this pandemic started, I here in New York with my team, I said, you know, this is really a time to concentrate on what's essential. You know, we do a lot of things at the UN. Not all of it is always very urgent. Here we really need to concentrate on the urgent response also to the pandemic. And then in my contacts with the members of this working group, the member states, it became clear very quickly that nobody wants to abandon the work of this group, that everybody feels this is maybe even more urgent, maybe even more relevant, given what we've seen happening also over the last few months. So there's a lot of positive energy still in the process towards its conclusion.
Yes, indeed. That's what I sort of hear around too, that because even the COVID-19 crisis also has accelerated this need to have a conversation around cyber peace, cybersecurity, risks and threats in cyberspace. And another aspect I would like you to comment on is, Ambassador, regarding technical cooperation, because I think it will be necessary, right? Countries that are more advanced, perhaps, or there has to be greater cooperation, technical cooperation, because there are some nation states that won't be able to deal with certain fallouts. So how do you see that as one of the aspects that you've been working on?
You're exactly right, Maya. That's an issue that came through very clearly from the member states. Maybe two issues we found out in these discussions. One is there is a lot going on already, you know, a lot of offers out there, many member states who have advanced technology, who have capacity to provide this kind of technical cooperation and capacity building. They know you know, the whole system, in order to be secure and safe, the whole system needs to have a level of resilience and protection. And if one member state has not an insufficient protection, insufficient resilience, the whole system is at risk. So we have together an interest really to help each other out and to elevate together the security of the system. Another aspect which I found very interesting is many member states mentioned that technical cooperation, capacity building is a two-way street. Even countries who we would think that they are technically not so advanced these days are exposed, and they have very specific experience with cyber technology and cyber technology attacks, and they have a story to tell. So this capacity building, this the need to exchange experiences is really going both ways and in all directions. Now, what we lack, I think, and that maybe is an area where the working group can provide additional value. We need some sort of maybe a mechanism or a platform, or however you want to call it, but some place where those who are in need and those who have an offer can come together and make sure that they fit, and so demand and supply can be better matched on a global level. That is probably something where the OpenEnded working group can make a real good proposal.
Indeed, yes, it seems like that it is looking like that, right? I think in the draft report on the website of the Office of Disarmament Affairs, there is also mentioned that perhaps that many country members and as well as other private sector actors have mentioned that they would like to see the group continue in some other form, certainly more than ever necessary. But do you think we are going to be looking at the creation also perhaps of another body within the UN? Because it seems like, although the transversality of the issues, you know, there would be, do you believe it would be necessary, or how would the Security Council, the UN Security Council, actually collaborate with the OpenEnded working group?
No, that's an ongoing discussion. I feel what it will be important to strike a balance. On the one side, it's clear that member states feel that this issue is urgent and important, and they want to have a space, a diplomatic space, where they can all get together and discuss it. I think we are also aware that the system is complicated and sensitive enough, so we will not be able to find all the answers within the relatively short, or actually very short, mandate of this OpenEnded working group. You know, there's also at the same time another group of governmental experts working on similar questions. So the balance is to find a way forward, but at the same time not to build a costly and complicated new bureaucracy, but something that is really fit for purpose and can provide a platform without being too cumbersome, complicated, in competition to existing mechanisms, I feel very strongly that the member states would not want to see that. But again, we are in discussions, and we will see how far we can agree on that by the end of this mandate, and how member states want to carry this on.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jurg Lauber. Pleasure to speak with you. Good luck with
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks for.
I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time. Bye-bye.